Hey there, Internet. It's me, Broken Terrain. And what do you do if you've thrown everything at your players, including the kitchen sink? Well, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd throw the whole darn farm at them. I'll show you how I did it right after the drop. So, I'm almost positive, though I've combed through the two posts and I couldn't find it, that this suggestion was offered up by a viewer in one of my 5K sub polls, where I asked for viewer suggestions for a craft to celebrate 5,000 subscribers. Someone, at least I believe so, suggested like a farm golem, so like made out of the barn, but then like limbs of soil and crops, and maybe there'd be a chicken in the window. And I absolutely loved the idea. So I wanted to give you props, but I could not find the post. I'm so sorry. If this is your idea, mentioned earlier, please give yourself a shout out in the comments, and well, I'd appreciate it. If not, then this idea came to me in a fever dream about a farm golem, and I thought it was an amazing idea. I immediately sketched it in my sketchbook. Something else won. The mill with water wheel ended up winning that poll, and so this idea was set aside until now. How did I make it? Well, I turned to those house templates, and I've shown you how to use those in some earlier videos. I'm gonna link those in this video here, and so after you're done watching this video, go ahead and check those out. You'll lay the templates down, sketch out your home. I modified the roof line for a barn type look, and then I drew. At first, I was going to have it a bit less animated, but then the more I thought about it, the more I liked the idea of the boards bending and cracking and moving. And so with that in mind, I gave the eye a little movement, and definitely around the mouth area, tons of movement there. Carve it out, the slanted board sections differentiated by the trim, and then for the mouth area, I cut that out all together, and then I have these wonderful thin craft sticks. I'm going to break these into nice lengthed pieces, cut the edge off at an angle so it inserts into the foam nice and easy, and then just go crazy with and do this big gaping maw. It turned out amazing. Here you can see the two side walls. I have done and glued them up together. Next, I'm going to move on to a roof made of cardstock. I think this is just like a Little Debbie or a Hostess box that I've trimmed down. I've marked where the folds are, and barns have this peak jutting out from the top of the roof, and I want to mimic this a bit. So I sketch it out on one side. I'll fold the chipboard over, and this way I get a nice even equal angle on the other side. Then I test for fit, make sure I like it before I glue it. Normally I jump the gun and I glue it first. This time, before I glue it, I'm going to measure out 1/2-inch increments and draw lines, and this is going to help me lay my shingle strips in the next step. Then it's time to hot glue the roof down. I'm going to hot glue down one edge first. This way I only have to worry about dealing with the glue on the one side, and then once that one side is down, using the hinge part there from the top score, I can lay my glue down and then carefully lay the roof down along exactly the edges I want. Then for the overhang, in order to fix that, so you don't see the cardstock, I just take a very thin piece of XPS foam. This was a scrap I had ripped earlier on the Proxxon. I'm going to do up some wood grain and then I'm going to hot glue it on the underside of that roof that's jutting out. I also added that timber beam there. I'm going to carry the beam across the backside as well, but we're not there yet. Now it's time to create a bottom piece or a floor for my my barn. Now I've got it so that this is like a top portion of a barn. Maybe there was a basement, maybe a whole nother level, so it reaches up higher. And I just carve in some floorboards with some support beams. I would do the 1/4 inch and then every 1/2 inch pattern for my wood, putting in little nail holes so that it looks good. I do a similar thing with some dollar store foam core for a second story, and then I use some of these craft sticks to strengthen it and just put in a few finishing touches and support pieces to make it look like actual barn structure. And I really like the idea of having, not only is it a monster or a beast, but now it's got some playable space in the back. Now it's time to move on to the roof and the shingling. Before I do the shingling, I do a quick little top. What do you call that? I don't know. The little top piece with the little pyramid roof up there. I'll later put a weather vane on top of it, but I need to put that in before I do my shingling. And then it's time to do my shingling, and thank goodness I had some leftovers from the last time I ripped a whole bunch of shingles. These 1/2 inch lines really help. They allow me to keep the shingles nice and straight and even so that I get the same spacing on either side and everything stays nice and straight. You can get a look at my finished roof from both sides. Boy, it's looking good, and I'm getting super excited about it. It was time to rip the roof off a bit though. This really hurt me deep. But I grabbed my clippers and started trimming and ripping away so that it appeared as though this chunk of the barn, when magically turned into a golem, just kind of ripped itself from the other half. And that might be a really cool craft, would be to do the other half of the barn ripped in half. Wow, that would be a cool idea. Note to self. Then I'm gonna do the beams, as I mentioned earlier. I'm gonna do these across the backside here, one for each angle of the roof, and I also do some support beams across the sides out of those craft sticks, just to hide the fact that I didn't go full detail on the inside, but also to add a little structure and support to the roof. And now it's time to turn to the limbs. You'll see I'm working on the legs first. I use my end clippers or my end cutting pliers to cut through some doweling, which usually scores it enough I can snap it off if I have to. I'm going to ensure that my pieces are all even. I cut 4 even pieces, 2 per leg, and I'm just going to hot glue them at the knees with a slight bend, reinforce the joints once it cools with some more hot glue, and then reinforce again on both sides and the front with some craft stick. So more hot glue, and then I'm going to hit the craft stick and just make sure the craft stick is connecting to both parts of that doweling knee there. And this is just going to give it as much strength as I possibly can, because it is going to be fairly large piece, fairly heavy towards the end, and I do plan on letting minis be inside of it, fighting and riding it and whatever else. So I grabbed some XPS foam. I cut it to a rough size and shape, and then just carve and stab through the doweling to create a foot and a leg. I'm playing with the angles here a bit. I don't know exactly what kind of pose I want for the beast, and ultimately I come up with this stepping pose, so it looks like it is beginning to stride through the fields and towards its prey or whatever the farm is off to do. I've got some of these extra panel sections that I made out of dollar store foam core. I plan on using them almost like pieces of armor for the farm golem. So these two pieces are going to be like shin guards and be the basis of the lower part of the legs. I'm going to glue one on each side and then turn it around and start to bulk the back of the leg up a bit with some XPS foam scraps. I ended up learning my lesson, and with the thighs, I end up carving out some XPS thighs, hollowing them out, slipping them down the dowel, and this gave me a nice beefy look to it. And once the legs were glued down to the board, I was able to create kind of a pelvis. I gave it a bit of a shape, carving it up, and then I'll hot glue it nice and flat and straight with the board. Once that's done, I've got my feet carved up a little bit so that they're shaped a little better. I go back to those same craft sticks, break them at a certain length, and then glue them up together so they look like kind of jagged toes. And I'm just going to stab them in. Once I like where their position's at, I'll hit them with some hot glue, and they'll stay in there permanent-like. And here is the key to the believability of this whole craft, because right now it just looks like chunks of foam, and it looks a little silly. But with the this twine here, I'm going to unwind it, keeping parts of it all wound together. I'm going to make it look as though it's like vines and vegetation that is gripping all the chunks of soil and dirt and wood together. And this is going to be the key to the believability of the animation of this monster, and also it's gonna hide all my seams and flaws and cracks. So anywhere the XPS foam is in multiple pieces, you just smother those cracks and crevices with some of the twine. And once we get it all hot glued down and trimmed up and painted up, hopefully it's gonna look like vine and vegetation that's all come together, twisted in a magical way to give our beast the look of reality, of being made partially out of farmland and earth. It was this was both very difficult and a very fun part of the process. The problem was there was just so much of it to do. Both the legs needed to be done. They needed to be merged with the pelvis, and then I would have to move on later to the arms, and the arms were a similar undertaking. I wanted to use a little asymmetry in this beast, just because he was supposed to be cobbled up of all kinds of bits and pieces from the farm. And I also think that one of the suggestions from the person with this idea was that it have like an apple tree stuck in it or something. Again, maybe not. Maybe this is all a fever dream of mine, but I decided to twist up a tree for one of the shoulder pieces that would ultimately be part of the beast. And then you can see I utilized the last couple sections of wall. One of them is for forearm protection, where the tree is on the shoulder. The other is almost like a shoulder guard, and the forearm is actually lots of bits of broken wood pieces. Then in order to the key to this is texture, right? That's why the rope is there, to texture like vines. So for all the blank foam pieces, I turn to my white PVA glue and spread it around, and then I'm going to flock with my craft sand. And I've got a thicker and a thinner coarse sand together that I really like using, and it really makes a very nice textured surface after the glue has dried and it has been painted. You get a good look at the arm here. Boy, it looks really good with the hand. And I'm going to, of course, I got to flock all of it, right? The legs, the hips, all of it. And here you can see I have covered the whole thing in half black matte paint and half matte Mod Podge. I did this just because I thought it would be a whole lot easier to get the whole piece done if I kept it separate. However, I can't keep it entirely separate because the truth of the vines holds for the pieces as well. I need to make the vines look like they're holding the arms on. So once I glue the arms on and then glue the hips and things on, I'll need to go back in with the twine. So that's what I do. I glue one arm on first, and then I begin to fill the seams with the twine. And I'm going to take some of the ends of the twine, I'm going to wrap it around the arm, and then others wrap around the barn portion of the build. And hopefully this gives it the look as though the magic has grafted these vines or grown these vines into position so that the beast's parts and pieces remain intact and can animate. At least I hope that's the effect. It's finally time to paint. First color I turn to is good old Mississippi mud, because there is so much ground or dirt or mud. It's a good place to start. So I'm just going to hit the limbs. Try not to get the other pieces, but not worry too much just because of the nature of this beast. Then I'm going to turn to flag red from Apple Barrel and hit the red parts of the barn. And this is a really cool step because the red barn slats are iconic. And once the red goes down, the piece really begins to come to life. I want to get the shingles painted, and I want that dark slate gray kind of look, so I turn to Apple Barrel's pavement. It's a nice looking gray, and it does really well for the shingles. Now Americana's light buttermilk to handle the white edging and trim for the barn panels. I screwed up there right away. Later I'll go back in with the flag red and hit any bits or pieces of white or brown that I didn't like or that the red didn't quite take. Apple Barrel spring green for all of the vines. And this took quite a while to manipulate this huge piece. It's completely together, all glued up, and it was very difficult to get some of these corners and edges, particularly with the white barn trim, but now definitely with the spring green. And here you can see the whole piece in base color. Boy, it's looking good. I hit everything with my homemade black wash, and I'm sorry I don't have footage of that. But it darkens and mutes everything. The wash goes into the cracks and crevices and adds a real gunk or grime to it, mutes the colors. Really great effect for this piece. And now that I've got it washed, it's time to flock again. So I'm going to turn to my white PVA glue, spread it along the base, and flock with my shredded turf here. Spread it on, tap the excess off. I usually have a plate underneath to catch the spill. And I'm still working on my very first tube of flock. If you're very careful about putting something down below your piece and making sure to save the excess and put it back in your canister, one canister of this stuff will last you quite a long time. I mean, I've been crafting for several years now, and I'm still working on that same one. So just make sure you put a plate under there or something else, piece of wax paper or something that you can pick up and then fold and siphon back into your container. You're going to have this stuff for some time. While I waited for it to dry, I wanted to come up with some kind of design for the weather vane. I ended up drawing a little rooster shape on cardstock, trimming it out, and then I'm going to stab the bottom with my my poker tool there, and then glue a piece of jewelry, like a little straight wire piece of jewelry, into the little cardstock chicken. And then once that glue is dry, I'm going to twist a small bend of floral wire to give it the appearance of a weather vane. Use a little super glue to glue everything together. And then another little jewelry cap is going to sit atop that little steeple on top of the barn. To further decorate it and to give it the feel of being a farm golem and not just a barn golem, I'm going to add some corn stalks. I had originally planned to do a whole bunch of these, but they were such a pain in the butt to make, and I'm not even sure if they look very good. So I ended up only making 3 of them. I still like the overall look of them, and I like the pop of color on the arm there. You can see I put them just below a little bit of fencing in the golem's arm. Time for a little more flock. I go back to my static grass. I got some great tips on what I was doing wrong with the applicator in my last video, and I just didn't feel like messing with it. So I went old school with it. I blended some of my smaller with my larger green, put them in my little shaker there, and then with my white PVA I'm going to spread it out carefully, batting it on top of the already put down turf, and then I'm just going to sprinkle my static grass in there. And someone mentioned a lighter amount of glue would help the grass stay. Oh man, it sure does. When I turned this guy upside down and tapped the excess off, the remaining grass on the glue had a tendency to kind of stand up, and it ended up looking really good. I was pretty pleased. So I think at the very least the lighter glue comment was correct, and I will try the other comments a little later. This guy was a whole lot of work, and I was just ready for him to be done. We're so close now. Doing a little bit of a dry brushing. I've combined a bit of that flag red with the white. It ends up being a very light pink, but that's okay. I'm just going to hit these red panels a little bit on the edges. Just highlight these red boards here. The fingers, the toes, all that red barn and woodwork. And it's going to make everything pop. It immediately looks so much better. There's an aged look to it. You get to see all the lines, all that hard work with the texture, the sculpting. I'm so happy with this project. Thank you to whoever made the suggestion in my 5,000 subs post. And if I was imagining it, then well, it turned out awesome anyway. I glue some clump foliage to my tree, similar to what I did in the mill video, and I can link that here so you can see how that's done. I've painted some of these little red beads red, or the wooden beads red, and I'm gluing them in as apples. And then finally, I have a little goose in the nest. I've carved the goose out of Expius foam, and I've made him a nest of twine, and I've put him in as the eye or the brain of my farm golem. So that's it for this project. Did you like it? I know I did, but if you did, smash that like button. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe and share the video with friends and family. They'll thank you for it. Thank you so much, everybody. Now just some beauty shots of my wonderful creation. I'm so happy with it. It turned out absolutely incredible. I mean, absolutely unforgettable. If your players saw this thing hit the table, they're going to talk about it for weeks, for sessions. It'll go down in character history, I do believe. What an amazing piece. And not only does it function as a foe, but also as a theater. Remember, it's fully playable. We've got 2 stories in the back of the head. While it's rampaging, you can have a battle going on inside of it. How cool is that? Super cool. I love this thing. Thank you so much for watching. I believe Super Thanks has been activated on the channel. So if you don't feel like going to my subscribe star and subscribing monthly and getting a PDF of my game, you could just say thank you with the Super Thanks button, and that would be really cool of you. I would really appreciate it. Just another way to support the channel. Thank you so much. As always, like each other, love each other, and craft on.